What happened when the dust of great battles settled and the noise of battle was replaced by the silence of the desert? We are used to seeing Egyptian warriors on frescoes at the moment of their triumph, frozen in heroic poses with weapons in their hands. But history is silent about what happened immediately after the spears were lowered and the last arrows were put away in quivers. It was a time when the work of a warrior ended and the work of a man striving to restore order to his world began. Behind the majestic monuments lies a routine full of strict rules, rituals, and surprising bureaucracy that few people think about. Watch the video to the end to learn how ordinary honey helped veterans return to life and why golden flies were considered the highest award for valor. Are you ready to learn the truth about the first thing an Egyptian soldier did when the danger was over? The first and most important step was not the division of spoils, but the spiritual and physical purification necessary to restore inner balance. The Egyptians believed that the chaos of battle disrupted the sacred order of Ma'at, and every warrior who had come into contact with destruction had to undergo a purification procedure. This was not a simple washing, but a complex ritual designed to separate a person from the violence they had experienced. Warriors descended to the waters of the Nile or used water from camping jugs to wash away the dust and sweat of the past. Every movement in this process had a deep symbolic meaning, returning the soldier to the state of a civilized person. They thoroughly cleansed their skin using special oils and rubs that were part of their travel kit. It was believed that water washed away not only dirt, but also the burden of what they had seen, preparing the soul for peaceful life. The priests accompanying the army recited special prayers, calling on the gods to bless the survivors and grant them peace. Without this ritual, a warrior was considered unclean and could not enter the camp or touch food. After the ablution, it was time to tidy up one's appearance, which for the Egyptians was a mirror of their soul. Soldiers changed their bandages, combed their hair, and lined their eyes with coal, which had not only aesthetic but also practical significance. Coal protected the eyes from the scorching sun and infections, but at this moment it also served as a sign of a return to culture. The soldiers' neat appearance demonstrated that the army had maintained discipline and was ready for further action. Even in field conditions, maintaining a polished appearance was considered mandatory for every servant of the pharaoh. Clothes soaked in sweat and dust were carefully shaken out or replaced with clean ones, if available. Egyptian linen, from which loincloths were made, was valued for its ability to keep the wearer cool and clean. Soldiers paid special attention to the condition of their sandals, checking the fastenings and soles after a hard day. Any small detail in clothing could cause discomfort on the march, so checking equipment was part of the ritual. It was a time for quiet conversation and mutual assistance, when everyone helped their comrades to tidy themselves. I wonder how this topic is perceived in different parts of the world. Do you agree that the ritual of purification was necessary to preserve the mental health of ancient soldiers? Write about it in the comments.
Record the damage to the chariots. 25 severely damaged, 10.
What if I told you that the Pharaoh's most formidable weapon was not chariots, but the papyrus scrolls of scribes? Immediately after the active phase of the battle ended, it was not looters who took to the field, but an army of officials with reed pens and paint. In ancient Egypt, war was, above all, a huge economic enterprise that required the strictest accounting and control of all resources. The scribes began their work by meticulously recording everything that could be counted, measured, and written down. Not a single arrow or sack of grain was to disappear without a trace in the sands of a foreign land. The accounting process began with an inventory of captured trophies, which were taken to specially designated places in the center of the camp. Gold jewelry, precious stones, fabrics, and furniture were neatly arranged and classified according to value. Scribe wrote long lists indicating the origin of the item and its approximate value in units of metal weight. This was done so that the pharaoh would receive his rightful share, and the rest would be fairly distributed among the temples and distinguished warriors. The bureaucratic machine worked clearly and impartially, eliminating the possibility of theft. Particular attention was paid to the accounting of prisoners, who were considered a valuable labor resource for public construction projects. They were counted, their names were recorded, or new ones were given, and their physical condition and professional skills were assessed. Craftsmen were separated from ordinary workers, and noble prisoners were kept apart for subsequent negotiations or triumphal processions. Each person became a unit in the state register, and their fate now depended on the records on papyrus. Scribes recorded to whom and for what work these people would be transferred upon their return to Egypt. Equally important was keeping track of the losses and expenditure of the army's own military equipment after the operation was completed. Unit commanders submitted reports on broken chariots, lost spears, and the number of arrows used. Based on this data, scribes calculated the need for replenishment of supplies and compiled requests for the royal workshops. This was a complex logistical task that required mathematical knowledge and the ability to plan ahead. The efficiency of army supplies directly depended on the accuracy of these field reports. There was also a practice of rewarding soldiers on the spot for providing evidence of their valor in battle. Warriors brought trophies confirming their victories over enemies, and scribes recorded these achievements opposite each soldier's name. These records later served as the basis for promotions, land grants, or cash bonuses. The reward system was transparent and documented, which motivated soldiers to new feats. Everyone knew that their merits would not be forgotten, as they were recorded in eternal lists. After completing their calculations, the chief scribes compiled a final report for the vizier and the pharaoh, which was sent by couriers to the capital. This document contained a complete picture of the campaign's success, expressed in numbers and facts, not just in fine words. The pharaoh learned of the victory from the dry lines of the report, which confirmed his divine power with real achievements. Bureaucracy transformed the chaos of war into an orderly history of the state's success. Do you think such a strict accounting system was the key to the centuries-long power of Egyptian civilization?
For your bravery, Egypt honors you with the gold of valor.
Guess what unusual item was most coveted by any Egyptian warrior? Once the bureaucratic formalities had been settled, it was time for celebration and recognition of merit in front of the entire army. The Gold of Valor ceremony was one of the most vivid and memorable events in a soldier's life. It was not just a medal presentation, but a grand spectacle designed to exalt the hero and inspire others to feats of valor. The focus was on those whose names the scribes had noted in their scrolls as the most distinguished. The main award a warrior could receive was a gold necklace in the shape of flies, known for their tenacity and persistence. The Egyptians admired how impossible it was to drive away this insect and considered this quality ideal for a soldier. To receive the golden flies meant to be recognized as the most persistent and tireless fighter of the pharaoh. These decorations were massive, heavy, and sparkled brightly in the sun, arousing the envy and respect of fellow soldiers. They were worn around the neck to demonstrate one's high status to everyone. The ceremony often took place at a special window of appearances or on a platform where the commander or the pharaoh himself sat if he participated in the campaign. The heroes were called by name and ascended the platform to the loud cheers of their comrades and the sound of trumpets. It was a moment of glory when a commoner could approach the divine ruler. Gold items were thrown down or solemnly presented to them from above. Necklaces, bracelets, and even gold axes. The ruler's generosity knew no bounds at that moment. In addition to the flies, there was another high award, the Gold of the Lion, which was awarded for exceptional bravery and strength. The lion was a symbol of royal power and ferocity, so such an award equated the warrior with the guards of the pharaoh himself. The recipients of such awards formed a kind of elite within the army, enjoying the special respect of their commanders. They were given the right to occupy places of honor at feasts and to be the first to choose their share of the common spoils. This created healthy competition and a desire to distinguish oneself in battle. But the awards were not limited to precious metals and beautiful symbols around the neck. Often, along with gold, distinguished warriors were given tax-free land. This ensured a comfortable life and stability for the soldier and his family in the future. Land in Egypt was the main value, and getting your own plot meant becoming a wealthy person. This is how the state rewarded risk and loyalty, turning yesterday's peasants into landowners. The award ceremony also included the transfer of prisoners to the personal service of war heroes. A soldier could receive one or more servants to help him run his household or cultivate the land he had received. This immediately raised the social status of the recipient, elevating him to the rank of lord. Such gifts made military service extremely attractive to young people dreaming of social advancement. The opportunity to change one's fate in a single successful campaign attracted many. The Gold of Valor was not just payment for service, but a symbol of the unbreakable bond between the pharaoh and his people. It demonstrated that the ruler saw and valued everyone who was willing to give their life for the prosperity of the two lands. This tradition maintained the loyalty of the army for millennia. Like this post if you would also like to receive such a reward for your work. Want to know a secret that will change your perception of ancient medicine? Egyptian doctors who accompanied the army were among the most skilled specialists of their time, possessing a deep knowledge of anatomy and pharmacology. Immediately after battle, field hospitals were set up in large tents, where the wounded received immediate care. The main principle of Egyptian medicine was cleanliness and prevention of infection, which was a revolutionary approach for the ancient world. Doctors used boiled water and clean linen cloths to wash wounds. The main antiseptic and healing agent was ordinary honey, which was applied to damaged areas of the skin. Honey had unique bactericidal properties, creating a protective barrier and drawing out moisture, which prevented the growth of bacteria. Animal fat and plant fibers were often added to it to create healing ointments and plasters. Bandages made of the finest linen were changed daily, allowing wounds to heal faster and without complications. This simple but effective method saved thousands of lives in hot climates. Decoctions of willow bark, which contains a natural analog of aspirin, and opium poppy were used for pain relief. Doctors knew how to accurately dose these remedies to alleviate the patient's suffering without harming them. Sleep was considered the best medicine, so the wounded were provided with peace and quiet in separate tents. Caring for the patient's comfort was an important part of the therapeutic process. Doctors understood that the patient's mental state directly affects the speed of recovery. Egyptian surgical instruments, made of bronze and obsidian, were impressive in their variety and functionality. There were special scalpels, clamps, and probes for removing arrowheads. Operations were performed with remarkable precision, and sutures were applied using ants or linen threads. The art of suturing was so advanced that scars were minimal. Egyptian surgeons were even able to perform trepanation of the skull, and patients survived afterwards. Particular attention was paid to the treatment of fractures and dislocations, which were common injuries in hand-to-hand combat. Doctors used rigid splints made of palm branches and resin-soaked cloth, which hardened to form a kind of plaster cast. This allowed them to securely immobilize the limb and ensure proper bone healing. Knowledge of the structure of the skeleton was gained through the practice of mummification, which gave doctors an advantage. They understood the mechanics of the body better than anyone else in the ancient world. The level of development of Egyptian field medicine is admired even by modern specialists. They were able to create a system that worked effectively in the most difficult conditions, saving the lives and health of the country's defenders. What other secrets of ancient doctors do you think remain unsolved? The journey home for the Egyptian army was no less difficult than the battle itself and required flawless organization. A huge mass of people, animals, and carts had to cross desert territories where water and food were as precious as gold. The logistics of the march were planned in advance. The route was divided into stages, linked to known wells and oases. The speed of movement was strictly regulated so as not to exhaust the soldiers and to maintain combat readiness in case of a sudden attack. Each transition was calculated by the hour so that the camp could be set up before night. Special attention was paid to the soldiers' footwear. as the mobility of the entire army depended on the condition of their feet. Woven reed or leather sandals wore out quickly on rocky ground and hot.
The crates by the third
Thousands
tent.
of spare pairs were carried in the baggage train, and special craftsmen repaired shoes at every stop.
March at dawn.
Soldiers were given grease to lubricate their feet to prevent cracks and calluses. Foot care was a strategic task controlled by the commanders of the tens. Water supply was critically important. Water was transported in huge ceramic vessels and leather wineskins on donkeys and oxen. Water consumption was strictly controlled. First, the war horses of the chariots were watered, then the people, and only then the pack animals. Iron discipline was enforced on the march. No one dared take an extra sip without the commander's permission. Violations of the water regime were severely punished, as they endangered the life of the entire detachment. Food on the way back consisted mainly of crackers, dried fish, lentils, and onions. Products that did not spoil quickly in the heat.
Here you go.
Grain was ground on hand mills right during stops, and fresh flatbread was baked on hot stones or in portable ovens.
Sandviper looked
This
at it and
allowed
said,
the soldiers to
"That's not
maintain
my
their strength
oasis."
with simple but nutritious food.
I swear I thought he
Sometimes the
was gonna
diet
drop
was
his shield
supplemented
right
with dates and game if they managed to hunt on the way. Organized meals ensured that there were no stomach ailments in the army. The order of the column's movement was strictly defined. Scouts and light infantry went ahead, followed by chariots and the main forces, and the procession was closed by a convoy with loot and wounded soldiers. This formation ensured the protection of the most vulnerable parts of the army and allowed it to quickly deploy into battle formation. The flanks were guarded by special detachments of mercenaries, often Nubians or Libyans who knew the desert. Safety on the march was a priority, and no one was allowed to relax. During stops, the army turned into a huge, well-coordinated city. Tents were instantly erected, temporary latrines were dug, and fires were lit.
Move those supplies
Sanitary
to the third tent.
standards were strictly
We need
observed.
more wood over here.
Garbage was buried so as not to attract insects and predators. Each soldier knew his duties in setting up camp, so everything was done quickly and without fuss. The organization of daily life had been perfected through years of training. Transporting trophies and spoils required special effort. Heavy items were loaded onto sleds or carts pulled by oxen. Prisoners were often used as porters, which made the task easier for the soldiers but required additional security. Scribes continued to keep records, checking the safety of the cargo at every stage of the journey. Nothing was to be lost or damaged before arrival in the capital. This long journey home was not just a move from point A to point B, but a demonstration of the organization and power of the Egyptian state. The ability to provide a huge army with everything it needed far from home was a true logistical miracle of the time. It was this system that allowed Egypt to dominate the region for centuries. Are you ready for the shocking truth about what the heroes actually did after the battle? A significant part of the time after the battle and during the return journey was taken up with the painstaking work of repairing equipment, which did not stop for a minute. Egyptian chariots, the tanks of antiquity, required complex maintenance after driving over rough terrain. Master woodworkers disassembled the wheel hubs, lubricated the axles with animal fat, and replaced cracked spokes using pre-prepared parts. Bent shafts were checked for microcracks and reinforced with leather straps. Bronze weapons, unlike steel ones, were soft and often deformed from blows against enemy shields and armor. Blacksmiths traveling with the convoy straightened bent hopla blades on small anvils, restoring them to their deadly form. Nicks on the blades were ground down with stones, and the tips were repolished to a mirror shine. It was noisy and hard work, the quality of which determined the life of a soldier in the next battle. Each weapon passed through the hands of a master craftsman before returning to its sheath. Bows, complex composite structures made of wood, horn, and tendons, required special care and protection from drying out. They were stored in special cases, and after use, the bowstring was loosened and the surface was lubricated with oils. Craftsmen checked the glue joints, which could come apart from the heat, and applied new layers of tendons if necessary. The manufacture and repair of bows was an art that required enormous patience and knowledge of the properties of materials. Armor, consisting of hundreds of bronze or leather scales sewn onto a linen base, also needed repair. Scales torn off in battle were sewn back on, broken threads were replaced, and leather elements were impregnated with wax for flexibility. Soldiers often did minor repairs to their protective equipment themselves, sitting by the fires in the evenings. Shields made of wood and covered with skins were checked for strength. Punctured areas were patched, and loose handles were reinforced. The drawings and symbols on the shields were repainted to restore their fearsome appearance. The shield was the infantryman's main protection, and its reliability had to be beyond doubt. Leather workers worked tirelessly to repair damaged coverings. Without this constant work to restore resources, the army would quickly have turned into a crowd of ragged men with useless scrap metal. Technical support was the foundation of the Pharaohs' victories.
To victory and the bounty of the kingdom.
The return to the capital, or a large city, was marked by a grand feast that the pharaoh held for his soldiers and people. It was a time when strict rations gave way to abundance, and food became a symbol of the triumph of life over death. Mountains of bread, vegetables, and fruit were taken from the royal storerooms and temple reserves. Hundreds of oxen and geese were slaughtered so that every warrior could have their fill of fresh meat, which was a rarity in normal times. The smell of roasted meat filled the streets, creating an atmosphere of universal celebration. Beer, the main drink of the Egyptians, flowed like a river. Huge jugs of the best varieties of this sweet and thick drink were opened. Beer was considered not only an entertaining drink, but also a nutritious product that restored strength. Soldiers received special, larger portions, and wine, usually available only to the nobility, also appeared on the tables of officers and heroes. It was a time when social boundaries were somewhat blurred in the general merriment. Toasts to the health of the pharaoh and the gods rang out from all around. The distribution of food was organized. Each unit received its share of carcasses and baskets of provisions. Officers made sure that no one was left out and that the distribution did not turn into a conflict. Even at the height of the celebration, a certain discipline and order were maintained. The ruler's generosity had to reach every stomach in order to secure the loyalty of his subjects. It was a kind of edible propaganda of the state's success and wealth. Dancers and musicians performed at the feasts, entertaining the men, weary from the campaign with art and beauty. The sounds of harps, lutes, and flutes replaced the rumble of war drums. This helped the soldiers relax and switch to a peaceful mood, remembering the joys of life. The cultural program was an integral part of the victory celebrations. Art served as a tool for psycho-emotional relief. A special place at the feast was reserved for memorial rites for fallen comrades. Some of the food and wine was poured onto the ground and burned in a fire. The Egyptians believed that the souls of the dead should also participate in the victory celebrations. The memory of the fallen was sacred, and their names were spoken with respect. The celebration of life could not be complete without respect for death. Most Egyptian soldiers were not professional military men in the modern sense, but were militias recruited from among the peasants. After the campaign and the triumphal parades were over, military campaigns were often planned so as not to coincide with key seasons of fieldwork, sowing, and harvesting. The conscription system was flexible and took into account the cycles of the Nile flood. The warrior once again became a farmer, feeding the country. Returning to one's native village was an important social event. Veterans brought news from distant lands and trophies. They became local celebrities whose opinions were listened to at the Council of Elders. The experience gained on campaign, discipline, teamwork, and tool skills was also useful in peacetime labor. Former soldiers often became foremen in irrigation or construction. The resources brought back from the campaign, a share of the spoils, rewards, or saved wages, were invested in the economy. New livestock was purchased, Tools were improved, and the area under cultivation was expanded. War thus stimulated the development of agriculture in certain regions. A successful campaign meant prosperity for entire. However, the transition from war to peace was not always easy. Men accustomed to risk and adrenaline had to reintegrate into the monotonous rhythm of rural life. The community helped them in this by involving them in communal work and rituals. Daily work on the land healed emotional wounds and restored a sense of stability. The Nile and its eternal cycles were the best psychotherapists. The state kept lists of these reservists, and in the event of a new threat, they could be called back to arms. But while peace reigned, their main task was to fill the granaries. The pharaoh understood that a well-fed country was a strong country and did not keep unnecessary people in the barracks. The balance between the army and agriculture was the foundation of the Egyptian economy. Veterans often brought back new seeds or knowledge of foreign farming methods they had observed in other countries. This led to cultural and technological exchange. The army acted as an unwitting carrier of innovation, spreading it throughout the Nile Valley. The curiosity of the Egyptians bore fruit in the most literal sense. For many Egyptians from the lower classes, the army was the only real way to climb the social ladder. Successful service and proven valor opened doors that were usually closed to ordinary peasants. The most talented and courageous warriors could remain in the army on a permanent basis, becoming professional officers and instructors. A military career provided a stable income, respect, and power. Privates grew into commanders who ruled over thousands of people. A special privilege for veterans was appointment to administrative positions in the conquered provinces or in Egypt itself. A former soldier who could read and count, which could be taught in the army, became an ideal overseer or tax collector. His loyalty had been tested by blood, and his discipline guaranteed that orders would be carried out. The state apparatus eagerly absorbed personnel who had gone through military training. Many veterans were given positions in the temple guard or police, ensuring order within the country. The protection of sacred places and royal necropolises was entrusted only to the most reliable people. It was a peaceful and honorable service that ensured a dignified old age. Former warriors became guardians of the peace of the gods and deceased. The highest reward in social breakthrough was the granting of a personal land grant, which was passed down by inheritance. This turned yesterday's poor man into the founder of a new dynasty of landowners. His children already had a different start in life, could get an education and become scribes or priests. This is how the middle class, loyal to the authorities, was formed. Some veterans, especially Nubian archers or guardsmen, remained at court, becoming bodyguards to the pharaoh. Proximity to the sacred person of the ruler provided enormous opportunities and influence. Court intrigues were often resolved with the help of the loyal swords of old soldiers. They were the silent force behind the throne. There was also a pension system. Old soldiers were given rations from state warehouses and clothing. They were not left to fend for themselves, which was rare in the ancient world. Caring for the elderly was part of the concept of mat, justice. Society respected gray hair and scars. War in Egypt was never considered complete without a grand religious finale. Gratitude to the gods for the victory they had bestowed. Pharaohs and military leaders went to the great temples of Karnak and Luxor to make rich offerings to Amun-Ra, who was believed to have personally handed the sword to the ruler. Part of the spoils, including gold, livestock, and slaves, was given to the priests as the share of the god. This was not simply a gift, but a repayment of a debt to the higher powers that had ensured success. The walls of the temples were covered with new reliefs and inscriptions detailing the battle and the triumph. These inscriptions and images were not just art, they served political and magical purposes. By recording the victory in stone, the Egyptians made it eternal and indisputable. Scenes of the pharaoh trampling his enemies were meant to magically protect the country from future attacks. Every soldier who saw these images understood that he had participated in a divine act. History became myth right before the eyes of those involved. Ordinary soldiers also visited their local shrines, bringing modest gifts to the gods of their hometowns. They gave thanks for being alive and for returning home. Often, votive objects were left in temples, small figurines of weapons, ears, so that the god would hear the prayer, or steles with inscriptions of gratitude. Personal faith was intertwined with state ideology. New steles and obelisks were erected in honor of victories, glorifying the name of the pharaoh and the valor of his army. These monuments served as newsfeeds of antiquity, telling all passers-by about the greatness of Egypt. They stood for centuries, reminding descendants of the exploits of their ancestors. Stone preserved memory more reliably than papyrus. The memory of war was frozen in granite to survive for millennia. We still read these stone pages, learning about the campaigns of Thutmose or Ramses, their desire for eternal glory. The history of the ancient Egyptian soldier is not only a chronicle of battles, but also a story of man's return to peaceful life, the restoration of order, and the search for meaning after the chaos of war. Behind the golden rewards and resounding pyramids lay hard work, strict discipline, and a deep belief that every step, from cleaning sandals to praying in the temple, was important for maintaining the harmony of the world. Their life after battle was as regimented and full of responsibilities as the battle itself. Now that you know what lay behind the ceremonial frescoes, look at the history of ancient Egypt with new eyes, the eyes of people who simply wanted to return home. Which of the traditions of return did you find most humane or unexpected? Suggest topics for future videos you would like to see on our channel in the comments.